Let me set the scene. It's a Thursday night, and I'm at a rooftop bar in the city with a few people I know from college. And there's this guy there, let's call him Marcus, who I hadn't seen in maybe 2 years. He walks in, and I notice him before he even reaches the table because you're supposed to notice him. He's wearing a watch that costs more than most people's rent, fresh designer sneakers. A shirt that doesn't have a logo but somehow communicates that it definitely should. He sits down, orders a round for everyone without looking at the menu, and starts talking about the condo he's thinking about buying in the new development downtown. And look, I'm genuinely happy for people who are doing well. I want everyone to win. But then, about an hour into the night, his card gets declined. Not dramatically, quietly. The bartender leans in, says something low, and Marcus nods like it's a technical issue. He pays with a different card, and the table keeps moving, and nobody says anything because that's the social contract. But I noticed. And here's the thing. The watch is still on his wrist, the sneakers are still clean, and the story about the condo is still hanging in the air, and nothing that I'm looking at matches what just happened. I've been thinking about that night for a while now, because Marcus isn't unusual. Marcus is everywhere. And I'm not saying this to drag him specifically. I genuinely mean it when I say the system he's trapped in is not his fault. But I think we have an epidemic that nobody's naming correctly. It's not an epidemic of poverty. Poverty is real, and it's a different conversation. This is an epidemic of performing wealth, of people spending money they don't have on signals they don't own to impress people who are doing the exact same thing. And it is costing people quietly, slowly, compounding in ways that are genuinely difficult to recover from. So that's what we're doing today. I'm going to walk you through 10 signs that someone is secretly broke, but performing rich. And more importantly, I'm going to tell you why these signs exist, what system engineered them, and how you can protect yourself from falling into the same trap. And I promise you, by the time we're done, you're going to see something you can't unsee. You're going to walk into a room and read it completely differently. I make content about the psychology of money because I think financial literacy is one of the most underrated forms of protection a person can have. If that's your thing, hit subscribe because we're just getting started. But before we get to the signs, I need to give you the framework because if you understand the system first, every single sign is going to snap into place like a key in a lock. Here's what most people don't realize. The luxury brands you see everywhere. The logos, the belts, the sneakers, the entry-level watches. A significant portion of those products were not designed for wealthy people. They were designed for people who want to look wealthy. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a documented, deliberate business strategy that the luxury industry figured out decades ago. Real luxury is a closed door. You cannot walk into a store and buy the thing that genuinely signals old money. But what you can do is buy the entry point. The thing with the logo that says, I'm adjacent to this world. And the industry built that entry point specifically to capture you. They engineered a second tier of products, the belt, the wallet, the sneaker collab, at a price point that is just painful enough to feel like a sacrifice. Just accessible enough that you can make it happen, and just logo heavy enough that people can see it from across the room. I promise you, this is not an accident. The logo placement, the brand visibility, the specific price points, all of it is calculated to extract maximum money from people who are performing wealth rather than building it. And once you understand that the entry-level luxury trap is a product of deliberate engineering, you stop being confused by it and you start being clear-eyed about it. With that said, let's talk about the signs. The first one I call the logo to net worth ratio. And here's the observation. Genuinely wealthy people wear logos less. Not always. But as a pattern, it holds. If you look at people with real, generational, or deeply established wealth, they tend toward quiet brands, plain fabrics, things that communicate quality through fit and material rather than through a recognizable symbol on the chest. The person who is performing wealth, though, the logo is doing the heavy lifting. The logo is the entire point, because here's what a logo actually is when you're not wealthy. It's a rented credential. You're borrowing the brand's status and wearing it on your body to signal something about yourself that your bank account doesn't yet reflect. And I understand why people do it. I genuinely do. When you grow up without money, there's something powerful about wearing something that says you've arrived. But the system knows you feel that way, and it charges you a premium specifically because of it. A plain white t shirt from a quiet luxury brand might cost $400 and get zero recognition. A t shirt with the right logo costs $400 and gets looked at all night. The industry knows which one most people will buy. The second sign is what I call the lease lifestyle. And I need to run some numbers here because this is where it gets genuinely alarming. I'm not philosophically opposed to leasing. Well, in specific situations for specific people, it makes sense. But here's the thing about the way most people lease cars. They're not leasing because it's financially optimal. They're leasing because leasing is the mechanism that allows you to drive something you cannot actually afford. Let me show you what I mean. The average monthly lease payment on a premium midsize sedan right now is somewhere around $650 a month. Over 3 years, that's roughly $23,000 spent, and at the end of it, you own nothing. You hand the car back, you do it again, you spend another $23,000. Over 10 years, that's roughly $77,000 in car payments with zero equity, zero asset, nothing. Compare that to someone who buys a solid, fully loaded practical vehicle, let's say $40,000 financed, pays it off in 5 years, and then drives it for the next 5 years for free. 10 years later, they've spent maybe $48,000 total, and they've had a reliable car for a decade. The delta between those two people after 10 years is roughly 30 grand. That's a down payment on a house. That's 4 years of maxed out Roth IRA contributions. And the person leasing the premium car looks richer from the outside. That's the trap. The third sign is the fixed cost floor, and this one is insidious because it's invisible until it becomes a crisis. Here's how it works. Every time someone signs up for a lifestyle, the apartment in the right neighborhood, the car payment, the gym membership, the subscription services, the eating out budget that's become a habit. They're building a floor, a minimum monthly number that they have to hit just to stand still. And the performing wealthy person's floor is almost always dangerously close to or exceeding their income. The reason this is a sign of secret brokenness is the stress response. Watch what happens when something unexpected hits. A medical bill, a car repair, a job transition. The person with a high fixed cost floor panics immediately because there is no buffer. There is no margin. Every dollar that was coming in was already spoken for before it arrived. Meanwhile, someone genuinely building wealth has a floor that sits well below their income. And the gap between those two numbers, the floor and the ceiling, is where wealth actually gets built. The trap is that the high fixed cost floor feels like success. The nice apartment, the nice car. It all looks like you've made it. But making it is when you have room, when you have slack. And the performing wealthy person, almost by definition, has none. The fourth sign I call the Instagram grid as financial biography. Look, social media is not inherently the problem, but here's an observation that I think holds up. The people who are most aggressively documenting their lifestyle on social media are frequently the ones most aggressively performing wealth they don't have. Because the grid has a function. It's not just personal expression. For the secretly broke person, the grid is a reputation management tool. It is proof. It is the constructed evidence that the narrative they're selling, I'm doing well, look at my life, is real. The vacation photos, the restaurant check-ins, the sneaker unboxings, they're not just content, they're testimony. And the expense of the lifestyle that supports that grid is frequently enormous. The trip to the right place, the outfit for the photo, the dinner at the restaurant where the aesthetic is right. And none of it is building anything. It's all theater. I mean, I get it. I get why the validation feels good. But here's the thing about genuinely wealthy people. Most of them have either stopped needing the validation or they never needed it in the first place. Real confidence about money is quiet. It doesn't need an audience. The fifth sign is what I call the money stress inversion. And pay attention to this one because it's the most counterintuitive. You'd think that people with less money are more stressed about money, and in an absolute sense, sure. But there's a specific inversion that happens with the performing wealthy person. Their financial stress is completely disproportionate to their apparent lifestyle. If you know someone who's eating at nice restaurants, driving a nice car, wearing nice things, and they are constantly talking about being stressed about money, constantly complaining that things are tight, constantly making comments about how expensive everything is, that is a flashing signal because those two things should not coexist. If the lifestyle is real and comfortably funded, the money stress should be low. If the money stress is high and constant, it means the lifestyle is a performance that the income is barely supporting. The stress is the leak in the facade. Watch for it. The sixth sign is badge engineering, and this one requires a tiny bit of car industry knowledge that pays off big. Auto manufacturers figured out decades ago that they could sell status at a lower price point simply by putting the right logo on a lesser vehicle. There are luxury SUVs on the market right now that share almost every mechanical component with a mainstream brand's vehicle. Same platform, same engine, sometimes literally assembled in the same factory. But they carry a different badge and cost $15,000 to $20,000 more. And I promise you, the person buying the badge is not buying the engineering. They're buying what the badge communicates when they pull up somewhere. Now, if you can comfortably afford the badge premium and you simply like the brand, fine. But the performing wealthy person is frequently stretching into the badge specifically because the badge is the entire point. The transportation is secondary, the status communication is primary, and the system is designed around this. The auto industry knows exactly what they're doing when they engineer entry-level luxury SUVs at a price point that's just reachable for the aspiring demographic. That's the trap. That's the machine. The seventh sign is what I call invisible debt, visible assets, and this one's simple once you frame it right. Think about wealth as having two sides: what you can see and what you can't. Visible assets are the things people can observe: the car, the apartment, the clothes, the watch, the vacation. Invisible assets are the things nobody sees when you walk into a room: the savings, the retirement accounts, the investments, the equity, the emergency fund. Genuinely wealthy people have enormous invisible assets and frequently modest visible ones. The performing wealthy person has the inverse: impressive visible assets and invisible liabilities, debt that nobody sees, credit card balances that nobody knows about, a retirement account that barely exists, a savings account that empties and refills every month with nothing left over. And here's the thing about this ratio: it's almost never visible from the outside. You can look at someone who is the picture of financial arrival and have absolutely no idea that the picture is entirely borrowed. The watch is real. The debt behind it is also real, and the debt is bigger. The eighth sign is the performative generosity trap, and I want to be careful here because genuine generosity is a beautiful thing. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a specific pattern. The person who picks up the check, orders the expensive bottle, tips aggressively, but not because they can afford to, because they cannot afford not to, because their identity is built around being the person who does those things. And I've watched this play out more times than I can count. The person who grabs the bill at every dinner, not from abundance, but from terror. Terror that if they don't, people will see through the performance. The generosity is not coming from a full cup. It's coming from a need to maintain the image of a full cup. And the cost is real. Picking up check after check, round after round, for a social circle that assumes you can afford it because you've trained them to assume that, is one of the fastest ways to stay broke while looking rich. The ninth sign is what I call lifestyle subscription creep. Here's a specific number for you. The average American significantly underestimates their monthly subscription costs. Studies consistently show people think they're spending around $80 a month on subscriptions, and the actual number is typically 2 to 3 times that. But for the performing wealthy person, the subscription creep goes beyond streaming services. It's the meal kit service, the premium gym, the car wash membership, the curated fashion boxes, the wine club, the app subscriptions that come with status signaling, the premium tiers, the black cards, the membership perks. Each individual thing feels small, $25 here, $40 there, but the total is frequently enormous, and here's what makes it insidious. Most of it is nearly invisible on a monthly basis. You don't feel yourself spending it the way you feel walking into a store. It just drains. Quietly, monthly, forever. And canceling it feels like downgrading your life, even when the life you're funding isn't actually making you happy. The 10th sign is the most psychological one, and I call it the arrival fallacy in reverse. The arrival fallacy is the idea that achieving a goal, the promotion, the house, the relationship, doesn't bring the happiness we expected. But there's a reverse version of this that the performing wealthy person lives inside. They've bought the markers of arrival, the car, the apartment, the wardrobe, before the arrival has actually happened. They've purchased the costume of success and worn it into a reality that hasn't caught up yet. And here's what makes this so painful. The costume starts to feel like a trap. You can't downgrade because downgrading would mean admitting the narrative was wrong. So you maintain the costume at enormous ongoing cost, even when the cost is breaking you. Because at some point, the performance stops being about impressing others and becomes about not having to face yourself. And that's the most expensive place to live. Inside a performance that you're keeping up for your own sake. Because the alternative is sitting with the distance between where you are and where you're pretending to be. Before I wrap this up, drop a comment and tell me which of these signs you've seen most in real life. I'm genuinely curious what you've observed. Now look, I want to pause here because you might be thinking, Bobby, this sounds pretty judgmental for someone who claims not to be judging. And here's the thing I want you to hear clearly. I'm not talking about other people. Not really. I'm talking about a system that is specifically engineered to make these choices feel rational, feel necessary, feel like the only reasonable response to the social world you're navigating. The entry-level luxury trap exists because incredibly smart people spent enormous amounts of money figuring out how to make you feel like the logo is worth it. The lease exists because manufacturers and dealers figured out that monthly payment psychology allows people to drive far beyond their means. The Instagram grid exists because attention platforms discovered that performing your life for an audience creates engagement, and engagement creates revenue. For them, you're not stupid for falling for any of this. The machinery is genuinely sophisticated, but now you know how it works. And here's the inversion that I want you to carry with you. Every pattern I've described today, the high fixed cost floor, the logo premium, the lease cycle, the performative generosity, every single one of them requires you to spend money to perform wealth. And every dollar you spend performing wealth is a dollar that's not building it. Real, actual net worth wealth. The invisible kind, the kind that compounds quietly in accounts nobody knows about, is built from the gap. The gap between what you earn and what you spend. And the performing wealthy person has no gap. They've filled every possible dollar with a signal, with a costume. And the costume is convincing, but it is not equity. It is not a retirement account. It is not an emergency fund. It is not freedom. The people I've watched actually build wealth. And I mean genuinely build it, not just earn a lot and spend proportionally. They tend to share a few things. They don't need the room to know what they drive. They don't need the logo to communicate their value. They make decisions based on math and trajectory rather than on how something looks in the moment. And they have an almost uncomfortable comfort with looking ordinary, because they've made peace with the idea that the goal is not to perform arrival. The goal is to actually arrive. And those are different games with almost opposite rules. The good news, and I mean this, is that the shift doesn't require a massive income change. It requires a decision to start measuring wealth by the invisible number rather than the visible one, to let the fixed cost floor drop, to let the logo go, to drive the car that doesn't impress anyone but gets paid off, to invest the difference, to build in silence and let the results speak eventually. Not to the room you're currently in, but to the future version of you who doesn't have to perform anything anymore because the math is finally on your side. You don't need to look rich. You need to actually be rich. And I promise you, These are two entirely different paths, and you can only walk one of them at a time.